In today's episode of Writer Chats, we meet renowned Scottish comedian JoJo Sutherland. JoJo has performed in comedy clubs all over the world, co-wrote and performed in BBC Radio Scotland's sketch show The Gates, and is the current holder of the 2020 Scottish Comedy Award for Best Show.
More me Scottish scarf to make you feel.
Oh, well, it's very much appreciated, Timothy. Do you like Timothy or do you like Tim?
Anything, yeah. Timothy is fine. Yeah. With you, I saw some of your stand-up. I was like, yeah, I thought it was wonderful, and then, yeah. Weird.
Oh, I'm loving you already.
Just a bit.
I've got a coffee. That's very unlike me, but...
Well, I saw your stand-up. You're talking about cocaine and all this stuff.
Well, bizarrely, I literally just said to Joe, who lives with me, I was just like, what? I was like, well, I'll do this podcast. And I said, and then will I just go and get us some beers? And he was like, yeah, well, go on then. So, yeah, I'm just not quite as organised as you.
Yeah, that's it, isn't it? But yeah, and then my sister said, she's like, don't drink beer, it'll look unprofessional. I said, but I'm not a professional. So I'm just chatting to her like a lady who's a comedian. So can you just, so I read some things about you. I read the thing in the Edinburgh Fringe review saying that you're from Castle or something.
Yeah, I grew up in a castle.
In a castle, whereabouts?
Just about 30 miles north. So I'm in South Queensferry, just near Edinburgh.
Yeah.
And then if you go about 30 miles north, there's a place called Dunkeld. Okay. And it's just near there. So it's sort of the gateway to the Highlands. So yeah, beautiful castle surrounded by 4 hills and a loch. And yeah, it was a kind of crazy bohemian upbringing. Yeah. And it didn't last very long because when I was 14, my dad got cut out of the will by his mother, and then suddenly we had to move out the castle. So I think there was some kind of correlation between Granny paying for the castle and her dying and leaving us no more money. So yeah, we.
So how old were you then? Were you just like 14, a little girl?
About 14, yeah, 13, 14, but also no mention of it. Do you mean that was very much? You know, I literally, there was a removal van outside the house and I said to Mum, you know, what's going on? She was like, oh, we're moving, darling. I'm like, are we? Where are we going? What? Did nobody think to mention it to me? And I spoke to my brother recently because, you know, we've all been having a hard time in lockdown and, you know, we've all had various degrees of mental ill health. And I certainly had a meltdown or two. And my family were kind of quite concerned about me, mainly because I just didn't fucking want to speak to them. So, but my brother,
you can use it as an excuse, can't you? Mental.
Yeah. It's like, yes, got nothing to do with lockdown. Just don't want to speak to you. You're emotionally retarded. But my brother had kind of forced his way around to see me, and we ended up talking about our childhood. And I was like, we did move from a castle overnight into a caravan. I didn't just imagine that, did I? And he was like, nope, we did. We just moved. One night we were in a huge castle, and the next we were in a caravan, albeit only for 2 weeks. But still quite a shock to the system of a child who had been told nothing and thought she was going to grow up as a princess.
What type of castle was it? Was it very big?
It was more, it's sort of like a mini castle. It was sort of like a hunting lodge. So it had 2 towers and a big sort of, you know, it's really long and towers with bedrooms in them and, you know, great big, so what you call a drawing room and a morning room and a dining room and a study and a kitchen and a scullery and a cellar and
How old was it?
Oh God, that's a really good question. I have no idea. I think it was built in 1700 and something. So
do you ever go back there and have a little look around? Or?
Well, funnily enough, because there's been no gigs in Scotland whatsoever indoors, none, since March last year. They closed the clubs and they've stayed closed. And we've been adapting. We've done the garden gigs. We've done the gigs to cars in car parks. And then December, the end of last year, December, there was the different tier system. So Inverness, which is really far north, that was in tier 1. And so indoor gigs were allowed. So I got asked to do the very first gig back inside in a club. And so there was another couple of comics. It was myself and Craig Hill and Gareth Waugh. and we all went, did the gig, stayed overnight in a hotel. It all felt very odd, like, normality felt odd. But on the way back, we passed, and I said, "Oh, do you fancy coming seeing my old childhood home?" So yes, I literally did at the end of last year. I took a couple of comics, and they just were looking at me going, "This is weird." So,
Did you go in? Did you manage to go in, or did you just go?
yes. Well, it was quite funny because the driveway, it's a mile long drive before you get to the house, up its private driveway, and it's got all these signs saying, no unauthorized access and do not go any further. And I'm just gaily driving up the drive, and Craig and Gareth are going, "Are you just ignoring the signs?" I was like, yeah. So I drive up and I drive around the back of the house, and then somebody's cutting wood or doing something, and I just sort of shouted out the window, just going, "Oh, I used to live here. I'm just showing some friends." And he was like, "Oh, I'm just doing some work." And then the woman who owned it did come out, and I said, "Oh, I'm JoJo Sutherland. I used to live here." And she went, "Yes, I know exactly who you are." And she said, do you want to look round? Do you want to show your friends? I was like, "That'd be lovely." So yes, it was just funny. It was just silly.
You want to reclaim the castle? No.
Yeah, I totally did.
She English. She should have just,
I know. So yeah.
That's
So
mad.
no, it was a nice little trip down memory lane, and Craig took loads of photographs. So I was like, "Oh, that's lovely." So yeah.
So have you been doing things online as well in the lockdown, or?
I have, and doing quite a lot, but different things. It's that thing of just going, it's so different from live stand-up that I immediately had to get out of my head the idea that it was like a normal gig. So, adapting to sort of piece to camera. The stand, for instance, at the beginning, we were recording bits of stand-up, but I tried to do it more like sort of visual gags, sort of pull back and reveal. And I was using props. I've become a prop comedian. I've got things in my house. And so just trying to find a different way of doing it that isn't straight stand-up.
It's weird because sometimes, like, I watch stand-ups like, do you know Frankie Allen?
No.
Frankie Allen's like a Scouser, a comedian, and he goes around. He's very like crude, to like to the audience. He basically just rips into the audience all the time.
Okay.
And I was thinking, like, because I like writing and all this, and I interview writers and that. And I was thinking, like, what's funny about what he's saying?
Yeah.
When you take away the context, when you're not in that room, when you're not drinking.
Yeah.
And how much of that is important, for a joke to be funny, you know what I mean?
Well, that's it. And a lot of comedians have found this through lockdown, having to find different ways to connect with the audience, because there is nothing that beats live comedy. And why, I mean, okay, the Zoom gigs or, sort of the things are okay temporarily, but there is no, having a dark room, low ceilings, everybody crowded together, close to the stage, and that energy that the audience provide to the comic and vice versa, it's like a little feeding frenzy. And it's exactly that. When you're talking to somebody and the rest of the people in the room can see you talking to that person, and they're laughing with you, but they're laughing at, with them or at them. But that same sort of, there's a sense of, oh my God, thank God they're not asking me that question. But some of it is, but it all has to be people in a room together.
They're like when I've been to see stand-ups and that, like, you feel a bit nervous, you're just thinking, I sound like a really nervous guy now, don't I? But I'm not. but when you see a comic, you're thinking, oh fuck, they're gonna say something and just humiliate you in front of everyone, and
Well, that's kind of, I mean, in reality, that's not necessarily the case. I mean, it's sort of our secret weapon. Yeah. But I always think that, I mean, most good comics don't just attack the audience with no provocation. I mean, God help you if, somebody does start on you and you haven't started, you will win, But generally speaking, you do want to connect with the audience in a good way and make people laugh. You don't want to have a confrontation with them necessarily, but you do want to create that, just that energy and that, oh God, it makes me feel so sound as that, oh, I can feel it,
Do you have like stock like sort of stock comebacks in your head? You know what I mean? So like you have like a prototype of what a person will look like for example, and you
Yes
say that about
and
them.
no. Yes and no. I mean, there are stock lines that I have seen comics use that would be considered hacks. So if someone's talking too loudly, someone say, "Oh, where did you learn to whisper in a helicopter?" Or, "What time do you call this? Can I get you a watch?" All these sort of things is, they're kind of stock lines. But when you hear a comic doing it, you kind of go, "Well, it's not yours." And there's a real sense of ownership about doing your own material, doing your own comebacks. And quite often, I know in the past, what I've done is something has absolutely happened in the moment, and I've responded very quickly just with what's in my head, which is the best way. You always just trust your internal monologue every time. What you think, say it straight away.
So how does that does that just develop with confidence? Like, do you feel like supremely confident when you go on stage? Because I think like a lot of it is that, isn't it? Like sometimes a comic's telling like a story and it's funny, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's not like it's funnier, like I said, because the atmosphere and because of the way they tell a joke. Because you be like relaying the story to someone back home.
Yeah.
And they'd just be looking at you just like, so what? Like,
why is that funny?
Yeah.
I think a lot of it has got to do with just life experience. And, two things. One, the longer you do it, the better you get at it, the more you have better gigs, that when you have a bit of a shitty gig, it doesn't affect you. You kind of go, "No, I know how to do this." And so sometimes, the energy just isn't right in the room. But also life experience. I've been doing this nearly 20 years, but my life, generally speaking, has always been a bit chaotic. I've not had to, look far to find drama in my life. And so for me, going on stage, that's where I go to relax. That's where I get away from the stress and strains of everyday life, having 4 kids, being married, and, things that have happened around me. So when I'm on stage, I'm like, "Oh, here's 20 minutes. It's all about me." Do you know what I mean? It's a little bit of me time.
Yeah.
So, and I don't give a fuck. I just don't give a fuck.
That's letting go, isn't it? That's what most people couldn't do. That's that's the key probably to a good comic. Like if it goes really bad, you probably blame the audience rather than yourself.
I try not to, because usually if it has really badly, then it probably is something to do with me. But it is that thing. Sometimes you just don't connect with an audience. And, lucky to say it very rarely happens now, because even if I have what I would consider a bad gig, where I kind of go, I kind of phoned that in, or I wasn't quite firing on all cylinders.
Right.
I've been doing it long enough, and I have enough experience to fake it so that the audience don't necessarily know. I think I've not had a good gig, but they've still got, "Oh, no, yeah, she was good." Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't really die. I've long gone are the days where I go on stage and people just stare at me and don't laugh. Do you know what I mean? So
it's that like that vlog I watched with Frankie Allen. He says he goes around on a Friday night. Sometimes them gigs are a bit worse than a Saturday night, because people come home from work at 5, they rush around, they get ready, take a bath, and then they're trying to do everything. But on a Saturday, they've been drinking all day, so they're already warmed up, you know what I mean, before you get on. Yeah.
And also Saturdays tend to be a bit more coupley, so it tends to be people's sort of night out, that they've arranged, they've got a babysitter, they maybe gone for a bit of dinner, they've had the day to kind of chill out. Friday, like you say, is usually a bit more frantic. It's people from work, they're usually with their mates rather than their partners, and it's all, it's a bit more,
So how did you get into this then? How did you get into being a comedian? Because it looks like you got onto the scene, became popular like 2000, 2002, something like that.
I didn't start. So I started in 2002. That was my first gig. But the real actual story is in 2000 I had a brain hemorrhage, which
I love that, yeah.
I mean, sometimes I go, obviously I survived, and then sometimes I go, did I survive, or am I in some fucking weird episode of Black Mirror? I'm not entirely convinced that this is real, especially what's happening now. I'm going, this is a fucking joke, innit? So yeah, it was, and it sounds really corny and cheesy, but when you do sort of face what was a life-threatening position I was in, I mean, I thought it was curtains, and recovering from that, which took a few months, you kind of reevaluate what's important. You don't sweat the small stuff as much. And when I'd recovered from that, because I had trained as an actor, I'd wanted to be an actress when I was younger, and life just got in the way. I got married, I had kids, I got divorced, I had a job in a pub, I was a wedding coordinator. And so after the brain hemorrhage, I just thought, do you know what, I really want to go back to acting. I really want to try and do, because I was at that point, I was divorced, I had 3 kids, and I was claiming benefits, and life was just a bit shit. So I saw this advert for a stand-up comedy course at Glasgow Strathclyde University. And it was more, I applied for it more to kind of learn a skill that would help me with getting back into the acting scene. I just thought, I've been out of the acting game for a while, and I need something that sort of sets me aside from the crowd. So that's the only reason. I didn't want to be a stand-up. Never crossed my mind to be a stand-up comedian. And then did this course. It was 10 weeks long. There was a gig at the end, just 5 minutes, doing it to, not even strangers. It was to invited friends and family. And I did 5 minutes. And honestly, Timothy, I fell in love with it. It was like, oh, this is amazing. And I've never even thought about it. I did that gig in December 2002. I didn't do another one until March. I applied for another open spot. And then I did another open spot, and then I asked if I could do the stand. And 20 years later, I still feel like I'm doing that. I just go, oh, can I have a gig, please? Or somebody said, can you do this? I've never thought about it. It's just kind of going, oh my God. And I look back and I go, this job is taking me all around the world,
So you've done gigs in America and places like this.
Yeah. So, and I've done, I do on cruises, and I've been to the Middle East and out to Australia, and Singapore and Berlin, everywhere. Yeah, loads and loads of places.
So you're always funny, or did you just, like, before this, did people always say, like, because that was this thing about comedians, yeah, they're always like, people always expect them to be the funny guy, you know what I mean? And this is like, you must have days where so I say, JoJo Sutherland's coming along, and people expect it to be hilarious, and you're like, she's not always doing, she's not always doing stand-up act. She's probably pissed off today or whatever, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so before you did this, before your brain hemorrhage and things like this, you were like, people always said you were funny, or you were just.
I think, because I've got quite a sort of pragmatic approach to life, and I've got quite a dry sense of humor, I've got a very dark sense of humor. So I was always the one in company with friends that would make an inappropriate joke. Do you know what I mean? I'd be, not in any way, not offensive, just I would talk about things that other people wouldn't talk about, whether it be death or suicide. Do you know what I mean? My best friend literally committed suicide. She hung herself, and all I do is tell jokes about it.
Yeah. And she would laugh in the aftermath.
Oh, 100%. She'd absolutely laugh. But some people find it quite shocking, even though it does make them laugh. Yeah. I think I talk about things people don't expect people to talk about, particularly not in a humorous way. But that's my coping mechanism. So I've always used humor as a way to deflect from sad things or bad things, or, do you know what I mean? I've been in massive debt. I've had my house repossessed. I make jokes because otherwise you cry, and crying is very boring.
Ricky Gervais said that, didn't he? He said, like, he said when he made The Office later on, he said to his girlfriend, why didn't you do this? I should have done this before. Why didn't I do this before? And his girlfriend said, you weren't ready. You needed that life experiences and all them things. And that made you funnier and, more humane and that, He's legit, you know what I mean? I've checked him out. But you move on.
That's what you have to with everybody now.
Yeah.
literally, I trust no cunt. I'm
Yeah.
just like, it's just, who is this person? What's going on?
That's it, because everyone's after money.
Yeah.
Most people are after money, aren't they? You know what I mean? They're like,
After money, and also that's the thing. I'm still a firm believer, and it's lovely to hear you saying that. It is about collaboration. It is about, you know, helping other people out, and you know, it's all symbiotic, and people can, you know, just because you give something away for free, or you know, and I get called the comedy godmother because, you know, if anybody's got a question or something, I'm like, yeah. What do you need to know? How can I help? It doesn't.
was doing
You know,
this like a sort of, you know, delve into people's lives a little bit. It makes me like do a little bit of research, just a little bit though, because I want to keep it like, you know, like
yeah, you want to
casual,
actually
you know what I mean?
find out. Yeah.
Like a chat, like I've met you in a bar and I'm just talking to you, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah, so this is why I find it interesting. I've got like a list of people who I'm going to continuously interview and then have them back on the show. You know, speak. So maybe like if you're on this now and then you see one of my other interviews and you say, oh, I like that guy.
Yeah, cool.
I'd like to have a chat with him.
I mean, I am incredibly approachable. I know I am, and you know, people that
I can
know
see
me
now,
really
yeah.
well. But I know because, you know, I know I'm a strong personality on stage, and I'm very confident. You know, people do think that, you know, people think I'm scary. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which, you know, I find hilarious. But I remember doing an after dinner once. You know, these after dinner speaking and sort of. I was emceeing or something, but sort of they'd had the dinner and then it was time for the speeches, and I just sort of stood up and said, okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a short comfort break, and then for about 10 minutes, so if you want to have a coffee or go out for a cigarette, then we'll be back, and you know, the speakers will commence. And so I went out for a cigarette and one of the guys somebody just saw me and said, oh God, I'm not going to get on the wrong side of you. I went, I just announced a fucking coffee break, nothing else. Do you know what I mean? And people are like, oh God, we won't keep on the right side of you. Okay. But maybe it's no bad thing. Do you know what I mean? It's like a sort of invisible barrier.
Yeah. Well, it's when people said to me about interviewing that bit, I said, not interview, it's a chat, you know what I mean? I'm not Parkinson, you know what I mean? It's like they give me the opportunity to have a chat with them, which is really interesting to me.
Yeah.
And I want to get away from that interview sort of mentality, you know what I mean? Where you sit there with a clipboard and you ask because what happens when people interview people is often they don't listen to the answers. Mm-hmm. And there's no conversation. It's like they've got a list of questions and that's it. So sometimes I'll have things that I want to ask you and I'll forget because I get engaged in the conversation, and I think that's more important, you know, to have. You know.
And that's it, and that's as well why stand-up works so well, is because inherently we're all nosy. We like to hear about other people's lives and what they get up to and stuff. And you know, a lot of stand-up is just storytelling, and you know, it doesn't matter who someone is. If they've got an interesting story to tell, we want to hear it. You know, go, oh God, I didn't realize, you know, you climb Mount Kilimanjaro or whatever it is. Do you know what I mean? So it's, I think.
Lots of like you said about Kilimanjaro and that, like lots of people are like, stand-ups are very self-critical. Mm-hmm. And they'll reflect on someone else's achievements and belittle their own, and that's good comedy, you know what I mean? When they start saying, you know, like Peep Show or something like this, I watched that show.
Good like, comics are self-critical. Bad comics are delusional.
Yeah. So do you have a problem with like people complaining about you, like political, like so sometimes like you get reviews, so you get like a review, and like I think I read some review that said something negative about you or something. I can't remember who it was. Might have been that Edinburgh one. And I thought like, because I'm interviewing you and because I'm going to have a chat with you, fuck you, you know. I got a little bit defensive, you know what I mean? Because often it's just some geek, you know what I mean, who hasn't achieved anything in their life, so they try and drag someone else down.
It's funny, I was talking about this with a friend recently about reviews because, well, several things. One, it is one person's opinion. Mm-hmm. There's a thing, particularly if you do a show at Edinburgh Festival, there's a game that comedians play, which is trying to get all the reviews, trying to get, you want to get 5-star, but to get basically play bingo. You want to get a 1-star, 2-star, 3-star, 4-star, 5-star. So you want to get every single one for the same show. So you've got a review that's a 1-star and and I think I didn't get a 1-star. I got a 2, 3, 4, and 5-star for my show the year before last. Which was like, it just needed a 1-star, which is kind of slightly insane that you want to get a really shit review, but you also want to win the game. So there's that competitive element. But it is that thing. And talking about reviews, sometimes they hurt. Of course they do. Anybody being critical of you is a kind of like, I don't want to know. But if you've got any sense whatsoever, not necessarily immediately, but always go back to those reviews in a few weeks or a few months. And sometimes you go, maybe they've got a point, or there's something about it I hadn't quite seen. And so don't always throw out, but equally, if you've got enough faith in yourself and I know that I'm funny and I know that I write well and I know that I'm good. Of course, I have days of self-doubt of particular things that I've written going, is this funny? Is that? But overall, I know I have a talent. And there's no harm in some people going, yeah, but that bit's not funny or that's not funny. Because equally, people just blowing smoke up your arse is no good either, So it's trying to keep a balance. You find that most people who do criticize you, it's because of something that they don't like because it's their personal taste. Yeah. And comedy can't work like that, When I go on stage, I talk about things that make me laugh, and hopefully the majority of people share my sense of humor. If someone doesn't, I can't be responsible for that. That's do you know what I mean? And also you can't make everybody laugh. Otherwise, do you know what I mean? If there's a room of 400 people, some people will love you, some people might hate you, some people will be meh. I don't want meh. I want people to either love me or hate me. Exactly. Because, but better. That's it. In life, you can't. Not everybody's going to like you. And I think that's just part of accepting that's what life is. Do you know what I mean?
Well, Rick Gervais said he got a bad review for Afterlife. Yeah. Afterlife is, to me, like, it's not my favourite one of his, his things and that, but he got a bad review for that. And he said, the review was stupid though, because it said, it's not as funny as The Office. It's more miserable. And it's like, it's about a guy who's dealing with his wife.
And his wife dies of cancer.
It's going to be more miserable. So some of the reviews are a bit stupid, you know what I mean? And like, they don't think them through what they're writing.
Yeah. And I think as well, so, something like Afterlife very much appeals to my sense of humor in as much as, it's dark, he's, it's exactly that. It's a very common life experience that people go through, when someone close to them dies, particularly of a disease like cancer. Yeah. And there's nothing funny about the actuality of that event happening. Both my parents died of cancer. There's nothing funny about it, but there is humor to be found within the situation and what comes out of that. Do you know what I mean? My mum, when she was dying, just some of the stories are just hilarious. What was a really sad time that we found our sense of humor in it to cope.
Well, I watched an Irish funeral. There was a funeral clip. Yeah, I didn't watch the whole. It's not what I'm into. Like, I watched a few like some clips from a funeral in Ireland. And it was some guy, and he was like, "Let me out!" He was knocking on the thing. What are you doing? And it was obviously a pre-recording that he put into the coffin, and everyone was laughing at the funeral because that's sometimes the funny, when it's at the darkest moments.
Absolutely.
Tragedy, comedy, you know what I mean? It's when you
it's tragedy time. Yeah. And it is absolutely, and I stand by that. Tragedy plus time equals comedy. And one of the lines I had in my show is that there is no length of time, and tragedy, the time can be immediate. Do you know what I mean? So, there's no specific, but it is that tragedy that does then quite often promote the comedy in the end. So it's a lot. Which do you like comedians, American comedians, or is it an English comedian? People often say Americans aren't funny, but I love like Bill Burr. Bill Hicks. And the Americans have I mean, when I was growing up, so, sort of 70s and 80s, American television, American comedians were very poor man's, example of acting and, comedy. And, the Brits were always ahead of the game. I think the Americans overtook us about a decade ago in terms of the stuff that they are producing, the subject matters that they're going into, the bound, they're pushing close to the boundary, sometimes stepping over it, but pulling back. And I think they're just much more
like Dave Chappelle.
They're much more fearless than us. I think British comedy is becoming quite fearful, becoming a little bit too trying to be seen to be saying the right thing.
Unless you're Frankie Boyle.
Even Frankie's gone a little bit, seen,
what I hate when they make a joke and they apologize.
Yeah.
It pisses me off. It's like, don't apologize, just own the joke, you know what I mean?
Own the joke. And there is a sort of sense of people trying to, and that in comedy, I mean, I sometimes run courses. One of the things I always say is you can never write a joke that you think somebody else will find funny.
Yeah.
You have to find it funny yourself and then try it. If you try to second guess what someone says, it is that thing. And I think a lot of what's happening now is people trying to be seen to be saying the right thing or doing the right thing, well, not actually believing in it. You've got to believe in your own jokes. You've got to believe in your own material. Otherwise, you're just a puppet. You're not authentic and you're not real.
Do you ever have that like political correctness in mind where you'd hold back, or you just wouldn't hold back?
That's a very interesting question, because I wouldn't ever deliberately go and say something just to piss someone off. But there is language. I mean, language has changed even in the time that I've been doing comedy. So, something like, so the use of the word midget was always very much, it was just, people just talked about midget. You don't say that now. And I wouldn't dream of saying it now, because, you do get better educated and you do understand thing, and when it's sort of pointed out to you, and a lot of people, so there's a fantastic comic, Candidly Davis, who's a little person, and that's, she doesn't actually mind being called a midget or dwarf, but in terms of, there's nothing wrong with just sort of having a think about how you address something or how you look at something. But also I know I feel quite strongly about certain aspects of feminism, about this, being seen to be saying the right thing whilst not actually believing it. I'm quite strong on that. And I'm also my comedy doesn't insult people, and it isn't deliberately, it isn't against minorities or any of that, but it is very stark and it is very truthful. Yeah. And some people find that a bit hard, going, oh, you can't talk about someone dying, or you can't talk about someone hanging themselves. Yes, I fucking can, and you can't fucking stop me,
Have you ever met any of your heroes along the way? Or not your heroes, but people, some of the the people that you meet who you've seen them from afar, and then you meet them and then it's like, I don't know, it's death or disappointment.
Quite early on, when I was still quite new, I'd probably been doing comedy about 3 years, and I was very lucky that the Stand Comedy Club in Edinburgh, do you know what I mean? They very much took me under their wing and gave me a lot of work, and I started doing quite a lot of hosting, and they've got a new material night on a Monday, which is for brand new comedians, but also for established comedians and well-known comedians to kind of come and try. Frankie Boyle's done things there, Kevin Bridges, all that kind of stuff. And I remember one of my first nights hosting Red Row, and Dylan Moran was there. And I was just like, play cool, just be cool.
Is he the guy from Black Books?
From Black Books, yeah.
I love that show, man. I love it.
And I love him. And so sort of being in the same space with him, and he was pacing up and down. And I just said, do you still get nervous before a gig? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, but you're Dylan Moran. Do you know what I mean? It was like, I mean, you'll never have a bad gig. And he went, oh no, I die my arse all the time. And I literally went, oh, brilliant. And not because I wanted him to die in his arse, but just to know that somebody who's that established and who I thought so highly of still had bad gigs. So it was at them going, oh God, it doesn't matter how good you get, you're still fallible, you know. And that made, because you look at people and you think, oh, they're just brilliant, I'll never be as good as that. Yeah. And then that just made me think, oh, I could. Do you know what I mean? If you're still allowed to have bad gigs, then yeah, I reckon I can do this. You know.
Dylan Moran, he's great. I love Black. Have you ever met Bill? What's his name? Bill Bailey, the other guy from that?
Bailey, yes. No, I've not. Have I met Bill? Oh no, I don't think I have. I met most. I mean, I compared Kevin Bridges' first ever gig. I'm his comedy mama. Yeah. But yeah, there's lots of them who are now very well known, but I forget they're well known because I've always just known them as other comics, you know.
So when all this is over, this COVID stuff and that, will you do? Will you do like a comedy tour again, or like what's like the biggest tour you've done so far? You know, like with European.
The biggest tour, but mainly so. At the moment, because I'm doing Jonathan Pye's tour support, so he's a big internet sensation. So we've been doing 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 seaters. I mean, incredible. And then for me, that's brilliant because touring with him, then I get sort of recognition and sort of what usually tends to happen is as a comic, you do sort of tour with somebody who's bigger than you, obviously, and then you go round the same venues with your own show and with slightly smaller venues. So that's kind of the plan, because I've got my solo show that I had in August 2019, that one best solo show, and just like nothing, nowhere to go with it. So the plan is to do that. Also, I'm going back on tour with Pye in September, October, fingers crossed. Yeah. And then, you know, and I just love the clubs. I'll never love the clubs.
What's the one in Liverpool like, the comedy club? I've never been there.
Hot Water.
It looks quite it looks quite intimate, you know, like quite.
Yeah. It's just adorable. I love it. I love it so much. And because Liverpool audiences remind me very much of Glasgow audiences, in as much as they like you or they don't like you. They're not, do you mean, one way or the other. They won't just sit in kind of polite silence, which Edinburgh audiences tend to do, you know, and so I love it because the energy from it is great. They're a bit gallus in that sort of, you know, all Liverpudlians think they're hilarious. Yeah. But do you know what I mean? They all do. So they'll give you a good go, but
Paul Smith is always on there, yeah?
Yeah.
You know him? Yeah. Paul Smith, the ginger guy?
I know Paul very well, yeah.
And the John May Show, I've started watching the John May. Have you ever seen this, the John May Show?
No.
Oh, no. Like, if Paul Smith is in that, he's in like the Christmas special one of that. So yeah, I'll send you a message. The John May Show. They're like Scousers, you know, like with the veneered teeth and all this, and like the, you know, the hairstyles and it's just, if you know Scousers, it's just a real piss take on Scousers, you know.
Yeah.
It's really good. But he's in that, Paul Smith, and I've seen him at the Hot Water online. I've never been there though. Like,
well, Paul normally hosts it, so I mean, every time I'm there, Paul's there. So,
but he just ripped into the audience.
Yes, yeah, and that's it. I mean, you know, nobody ever thought of it before. And Paul Blair, who owns Hot Water, I mean, he was smart. He recorded Paul comparing and put it out online. No one ever thought of it before. I mean, it's a really good example of how to become incredibly successful, cutting out the middleman, cutting out the managers, cutting out the agents, cutting out the Mock the Week and the Live at the Apollo, and going straight for the audience. And that's what Hot Water's done with Paul Smith, and made a huge, I mean, he's selling out Echo Arena for fuck's sake.
What's the capacity there, Hot Water? Is it just like few hundred?
They've got 2 rooms, so they've got downstairs. So what normally happens in normal times is that they run 4 shows a night. So there's an early show and there's a late show, and there's the main room and there's a studio room. So for instance, if so downstairs probably 180, 200, something like that, and then upstairs is 50. So I'll open the show downstairs and then go upstairs and close the show upstairs, and then vice versa. So we all swap round. which is great. But after 4 shows in one night, you're just going, did I already say that? You can't forget.
That's another thing I was going to touch on. You know, like you've got your script, or not a script that you just stick to all the time.
I've got bullet points. I've got ideas.
Points, yeah. And then, do you ever like? I remember Bill Hicks. You know, Bill Hicks, the American comedian.
Yeah.
He said, "I've been doing this for 10 years, so forgive me if I plaster on a fake smile and plow through this shit one more time." Is it ever just like very, you know, just like robotic? Sometimes you just kind of going through the motions. Yeah.
And that's when I was saying earlier, sometimes that's a bad gig to me, when I feel that I've just pressed play and I've just said the words, I've just pressed play and I've got to the end. And I've done it a bit in row. I've done it just like, this is my jokes, this is the punchline, next one, this is my joke. And, you know, you kind of, but I know when I've done it like that, that's not me performing to my best. Yeah. People are laughing because the jokes are funny. But in terms of, I'm much, much better when I come on stage, not really thinking about what I'm going to say. I've got a bullet points. I go, I might talk about Finn, or I might talk about my husband, or I might talk about that trip I took to the super, or I might talk about that. So I've got an idea. But I love going on stage mid-conversation, having maybe just met somebody outside when I was having a cigarette and had a conversation with them. They don't even know that I'm the comic that's coming on. So I come on stage and go, oh, hello, and, you know, and feed off whatever they say. Exactly. And then, you know, and then 9 times out of 10, someone will say something that will remind you of a bit of material that you then go, oh, blah, 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 which then makes it look like you've just made it up on the spot because it's in conversation. And when that happens, it's just joyous. But you can't rely on that happening every time. That's when the magic happens. Sometimes you just have to rely on the material.
Your opening line was the best opening line.
What about cocaine?
Yeah. Just, it's stupid, but it's funny. I like it. It's like the wedding one. You know, have you seen it when people do the wedding speech? I've seen somebody do a wedding speech, and he said this. He said they say the first minute's the worst part of the speech, and then he just stay quiet for the whole minute, and everyone's feeling like, what's going on? He said, "Now that's over with," you know. And it's a bit brilliant. You get people with that, like the opening line is obviously.
Yeah, and I think as well, because I'm slightly older, but I think because I dress really smart, I mean, you've got me with my hair all up, but normally, do you know what I mean? I make a bit of an effort.
I put some filters on the video.
Thank you. But I think because, you know, this is just true of life, we all make a judgment of each other within the first 30 seconds of meeting someone. We form an opinion before someone even... Thank you. But so people will do that. An audience will automatically judge me as I'm walking to the stage. They'll see an older woman dressed very smartly, and then when I start to speak, that I speak quite well, and they will assume that I'm this kind of. So when I say something like, you know, start my opening, like that is the last thing that they would expect to come from someone looking and sounding like me, which is what causes comedy. It is when you completely turn people's expectations away from what they were expecting. So
I love it. Yeah. I mean, the idea of speaking to you today was to get the insight into the writing behind it. You know what I mean? There's obviously there's channels about the ideas about writers and things like that. And I think like lots of the things you said today give a real good insight, you know, into behind the comic rather than just being funny.
Yeah.
Like the nuts and bolts of comedy, you know what I mean? And it fascinates me because it's something I've always watched stand-ups and things like this and for years and years. And I've always, people admire them, but you don't know why. You can't see why. What's this? You know, there's many, many variables to making a good comic. You know what I mean? There's like the confidence, you know, the writing, and there's just so many. Yeah. And sometimes it's just,
And that's why every gig is different, and that's why you can never say as a stand-up, "Oh right, I've nailed it. I know how to do this now," because you're only as good as your last gig. There's, like you say, absolutely. There's so many elements. The shape of the room, you know, how long, if people have had to wait too long to for the show to start, how drunk the audience is, what kind of mood the actors
Will you adapt that a little bit?
Always, every time. And so that's that thing of sort of, you know, there's a phrase that comics use about reading the room. You really have to read the room. You have to be in the moment. And there's nothing more frustrating actually than watching somebody go out and say a line that they've said time and time and time again, when it just isn't the right audience, or that you kind of going, this doesn't fit. This is completely at odds with where you are, you know. So that's why I always like to go on stage not really knowing what I'm going to say.
But then there's things that stick out, like from your comedy, from what I've watched, and it's like, you know what, when I was watching you, I didn't sit down and like think, I'm going to deliberately try and remember things that she said.
Yeah.
Because that's like, that to me, that's like being a bit fake and it's not funny. But but I did, after I watched it, I did remember things. So it was like Bin Laden and
Bin Laden, yeah.
I even that just sticks in my head. Bin Laden, you know, you feel like you know it a little bit.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, because because it's like I've got a 16, well, she's 18 now, 18-year-old daughter called Finn because I wanted a boy. I've changed her name to Bin Laden because she needs shooting. And
she's the best out of your kids, yeah. She's the best one out of your kids, Bin Laden.
She thinks she is.
She's my favourite now.
She's your favourite? Oh, I'll tell her that. She'll be very, very pleased. I had a message from my eldest daughter, Kira, because all my kids have moved out now, and obviously lockdown and stuff. But my son lives in Edinburgh, and I can't remember. We're all in a group chat, and then I'd said something about, I'm not talking to Rory, and Kira texted me and said, what's Golden Boy done now then? Or more to the point, what hasn't he done? Has he not phoned his mother? I was like, you bang on my money. So all the girls think that the boy is the golden child, but he's the one that just, he's like a cat. He just doesn't give a shit.
Do they come and see your kids? Do they go and watch the performances?
Yeah.
Is it weird? Like, you know, I don't know how much of it's true.
It's all true. That's
your family. You said about like it. I mean, I assume about like you said you were married to
my ex-husband's brother. Yeah, that is.
Is that weird for them, or are they okay? Do they just?
Yes. So I mean, my kids are so great in that respect. In as much as they kind of tease me. They keep me very grounded, but they're the ones that say, "God, without us, you wouldn't have any material." And I'm like, yeah probably. Yeah. And I think secretly they kind of quite like it, and also they can very easily differentiate because it's all based in truth, but on stage they're like my comedy kids and my comedy husband, and they know that I've exaggerated it, or I put words into their mouths that they didn't actually say, but so but Finn is called Bin Laden. That is the joke. But yes, so, and I think they do like it. That I mean, my eldest daughter probably she doesn't really bother, and my youngest now, because Finn does, she always goes, "You're not funny, mum. You're not funny, mum. You're not funny, mum." But now she's at Glasgow College, and quite a lot of her friends have now seen me online. And her friends think I'm very funny, and she's kind of basking in the glory. Do you know what I mean? The reflected glory, going, yeah, my mum's really funny. I'm like, oh, you've changed your tune. Do you know what I mean?
Do you get people like, you get up on stage, you talk about cocaine or something, you know what I mean? Yeah. You get people like saying, do you want some cocaine? Or
yep. Well, this is the thing. I was talking to we talk about lots of things, but people do absolutely, when you're on stage, whether you're lying or not. The trick of stand-up is even if you're lying through your teeth, you have to make it believable to the audience. The audience have to believe you. That's the contract that they buy into what you're saying. And so that's it, absolutely. And my sort of persona on stage is somebody that, drinks heavily and takes coke and smokes fags, and I do all that mainly socially, but bizarrely I don't actually drink at home. And you know,
I never drink alone, like normally.
no, me neither, never. But I'm a heightened version of myself. But yeah, no, people do. And there's another, I won't name him, but there was another comic that used to deliberately talk about taking coke because he was like, he always knew he could offer some in the break. He'd go, okay.
Like Liam Gallagher said it. Like he said, like he was not to me. He said it to someone else. Yeah, but he said like
My pal Liam.
people come up to him and say, "Do you want a line of cocaine?" And he's like, "What decade are you in?"
Yeah.
I'm 45 years old. You know what I mean?
I know. Yeah, yeah.
This is when I was 20.
I
You
know.
know?
I'm nearly 55, so I've not learned those lessons.
That's all right. You're still young. It's still young. Yeah.
I think I'm still young.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's hot off the press, but I'm now no longer married to my ex-husband's brother because we split up in lockdown. So lots of new material.
Exactly. Makes you more excited about going on tour.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
yeah.
I'm gonna let you go there because I've got like everything I want, so I don't care anymore.
Oh, brilliant. Good. I'm delighted.
It was amazing to speak to you, honestly. One of the more, one of my favourite interviews I've done. Like,
oh, thank you.
Honestly, lovely. And I'll definitely come and see you when you're wherever I am. You know what I mean?
Please do. And well, it's just nice.
If you can come on the channel again.
I'd love to.
The idea is if I get like some, different people, so it's not always just chatting to me. Like the idea is to chat to other people, but it's really, I'm happy that I just got to chat to you today, to be honest. And not, it's easy. But to come on the channel, you get different people, like different, personalities and things like this, and it'll be great.
Yeah.
Loved it, honestly. I think the beer helped, but
beer always helps. I've never known a situation where beer hasn't helped.
Okay.
Really nice to chat to you.
Yeah, it's lovely. I'll be in touch, yeah.
Cool. Take care.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.